Alright, here's how it all started. My life was, well, I thought it was pretty damn perfect. Picture this. I was a middle-aged guy, working a decent job in the finance department of a big corporation downtown. I had an apartment in a nice neighborhood, two amazing kids I'd do anything for, and, of course, Chloe, my wife. She was beautiful, smart, the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. For years, I figured I'd hit the jackpot, you know? But looking back, I was so fucking blind. At first, everything seemed great. We'd have these lazy Sunday mornings where we'd lie in bed, talking about nothing and everything, making plans for the future. But slowly something changed, and not in that way you notice all at once. It was more like a slow, creeping feeling in the back of my mind that I tried to ignore. Chloe, she started pulling away. I can't pinpoint exactly when it started. Maybe it was when she began hanging out more with her friends, Lucy and Melissa. At first, I didn't mind. Everyone needs their space, right? But then, suddenly, these girls' nights turned into weekends away. She claimed it was for work, but it didn't make sense. She was never the kind to work late nights or travel before. And then came the excuses. Missed calls, unanswered texts, saying she was too busy to pick up her phone. There were nights when she'd come home late, eyes glazed over, looking exhausted. But when I'd ask her about her day, she'd get all defensive, snapping at me, saying I was interrogating her. Seriously? I was just trying to understand what was going on. The Chloe I married used to share everything with me. Now, I get a one-word response if I was lucky. I tried talking to her about it. One night, after the kids were in bed, I cornered her in the kitchen, asking why she was being so distant. She just sighed, rolled her eyes, and muttered something about how she was just stressed from work. But that was bullshit, and deep down I knew it. I could see it in her eyes, the way she avoided looking at me, the way her phone was always face down on the table. She had that damn thing glued to her hand, always texting but never when I was around. The paranoia started to eat at me. It's embarrassing to admit, but I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering who the hell she was talking to. The bed felt like a cold, empty void between us. Every time her phone buzzed with a new notification, I'd feel this sick knot in my stomach. I told myself I was being crazy, that I needed to trust her, but fuck, it was hard when every sign was screaming that something wasn't right. I turned to Trevor, my best friend since high school. Trevor's been there for every big moment in my life. My wedding, the birth of my kids, the drunken nights out when I needed to blow off steam. He practically lived at our house some weekends, which, looking back, is a little ironic considering everything that came next. When I told him about my suspicions, he shrugged it off, said I was probably overthinking things. I wanted to believe him, but there was this weird vibe between us lately, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. One night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't wrapped up in my mess. So, I hit up an old buddy, Dane, and we met at this dive bar where we used to go back in the day. We had a few beers, and after some small talk, I finally spilled my guts. Told him everything that had been going on with Chloe, the late nights, the excuses, the fucking weird energy between her and Trevor. Dane listened, taking it all in, and then, without even flinching, he dropped the bomb. Jake, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I saw Chloe. She wasn't with Trevor. She was with some other guy. At first, I thought he was messing with me, trying to get a rise out of me like he used to do in our younger days. But he looked dead serious. Let's just say it wasn't a friendly hug. I laughed it off at first, more like a desperate attempt to convince myself he was joking. But Dane didn't laugh. He just kept looking at me, like he was waiting for it to sink in. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, this wave of nausea rolling through me. "You're sure?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He nodded. "Yeah, Jake, I'm sure. I wish I wasn't." I left the bar that night feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. Who was this guy? How long had this been going on? I kept replaying all those little moments that I'd brushed off. The secretive texts, the work trips, the night she'd come home smelling like perfume that definitely wasn't hers. I wanted to believe it was all a mistake, some kind of sick misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew Dane wasn't lying. When I got home, Chloe was already asleep. I just stood there, looking at her, trying to figure out who the hell I was even married to anymore. I thought about shaking her awake, demanding answers. But what good would that have done? If she was cheating, she'd just deny it or twist it around to make me look crazy. And if by some miracle she wasn't, well, I wasn't sure I could handle that either. I lay down next to her, staring up at the ceiling, feeling like my whole world was collapsing in on itself. The worst part? I couldn't tell if I was angrier at Chloe for possibly betraying me, or at myself for being so fucking clueless. I'd trusted her, given her everything, and now, I didn't know what was real anymore. The next morning I decided I needed proof. I wasn't just going to sit around like a chump while my wife screwed around behind my back. I had to know for sure. That's when I started watching her like a hawk. Every time her phone buzzed, I'd try to catch a glimpse. I'd ask her about her plans in that casual, I'm not suspicious kind of way, just to see if her stories would line up. And the more I watched, the more things just didn't add up. I could feel something dark brewing inside me. This rage that I'd been holding back for far too long. I didn't know what my next move was, but one thing was certain. I was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of the shitstorm that was about to turn my entire life upside down. You know, after Dane dropped that bomb on me, I went through every damn emotion you can think of, disbelief, rage, heartbreak, all of it. But eventually, I reached a point where I just couldn't sit on my ass and do nothing. I needed answers. And if Chloe was playing me for a fool, I was going to find out exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. I started watching her like a fucking hawk. Every time she left the house, I was taking mental notes. The time she left, where she claimed to be going, how long she was gone. And you know what? The stories didn't match up. She'd say she was going to Lucy's, but when I checked the mileage on the car, it didn't add up. Calls I'd try to make would go straight to voicemail. And she'd claim her phone died or that she was in a meeting. Yeah, right? But here's where it got really twisted. It wasn't just this mysterious other guy Dane mentioned. The more I watched her, the more I noticed Trevor's name coming up. At first, it seemed harmless. He was my best friend, after all. But then I started paying attention to the timing of her texts, the way her face would light up with this little smirk whenever she got a message. And one night, when she'd had a few too many glasses of wine, I caught a glimpse of her phone screen from across the room. Trevor's name was there, along with a heart emoji. That was it. That was the fucking straw that broke the camel's back. I knew I needed more than just suspicion. I needed proof. So, I started getting a little bolder. While she was in the shower one night, I managed to grab her phone, and there was a whole string of messages between her and Trevor. They were careful, never outright saying anything incriminating, but the tone was all wrong. Inside jokes I was never a part of, mentions of things that didn't line up with what either of them told me. I was shaking as I scrolled through, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the damn thing. But I kept going, needing to know how deep they'd cut me. I felt this rage, this fire inside me that I'd never known before. I couldn't just let this go. If Chloe and Trevor were going to betray me, then fuck it, I was going to hit back where it hurt. And that's when I remembered Marilyn. Yeah, Trevor's mom, Marilyn. She was always that cool mom, you know? The type who never really acted her age, always dressed to impress, and had this flirty, playful vibe that I'd always secretly noticed but never acted on. I mean, come on, she's an attractive woman, even with a couple of decades on me. But it had always been just innocent jokes, harmless flirting when I'd visit Trevor's place. That was until everything went to shit. I don't know what snapped inside me, but I decided right then that if Trevor was fucking around with my wife, I was going to pay him back tenfold. The best way to do that? Go after the one woman who meant everything to him. It was petty, it was cruel, but I was so damn angry I didn't care. So, I made a plan. I grabbed a decent bottle of wine from the collection Chloe and I had been saving. Fuck it, it's not like we were going to celebrate anything anytime soon. And I drove over to Marilyn's place. The entire ride there, I kept wondering if I'd really go through with it. But the second she opened the door, smiling in that warm, familiar way, all my doubts vanished. She was wearing this tight, black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, and there was this glimmer in her eyes like she knew I wasn't just there to talk about the weather. We had a few drinks, reminiscing about old times. But every time she laughed, every time she leaned in just a little too close, I felt that fire burning hotter. I wasn't thinking straight. I just wanted to hurt Trevor as much as I was hurting. So, I went for it. I leaned in, told her she was still the most beautiful woman I'd ever met, that I'd always had a thing for her. And you know what? She didn't push me away. In fact, she pulled me closer. What happened next? Yeah, you can guess. I'm not proud of it, but we ended up in her bedroom. I could lie and say I was drunk, that I wasn't thinking clearly, but the truth is, I knew exactly what I was doing. I wanted to hurt Trevor, and I wanted to feel something, anything, other than the gut-wrenching betrayal that was eating me alive. Marilyn, for her part, was all in. She kissed me like she was starving, like she'd been waiting for this moment just as long as I had. For a few hours, I forgot about Chloe, about Trevor, about everything. It was just me and Marilyn, tangled in sheets, lost in our own little world of revenge and desire. The next morning, though, fuck, man, the guilt hit me like a freight train. I woke up with Marilyn asleep beside me, her arm draped over my chest, and I felt like the biggest asshole on the planet. I mean, sure, I'd gotten my revenge, but at what cost? I just slept with my best friend's mother. I kept telling myself it was justified, that Trevor deserved it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I got dressed quietly and slipped out before Marilyn woke up. I couldn't face her, couldn't even look her in the eyes. As I drove home, the high of revenge wore off, and all that was left was this sick, hollow feeling in my gut. What the hell had I done? Back at home, Chloe was in the kitchen, acting like everything was normal, like she hadn't been tearing our marriage apart piece by piece behind my back. I looked at her and wondered if she'd ever really cared about me, or if it had all just been some long, elaborate game. I thought sleeping with Marilyn would make me feel like I'd taken back control, but instead I just felt empty. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just forgive and forget. I needed to know more, needed to understand just how deep this betrayal went. Because now it wasn't just about Chloe or Trevor. It was about me. I had to figure out if I was really the fool they'd made me out to be, or if I still had the power to turn this whole situation around. Little did I know, though, that the shitstorm was far from over. This was just the beginning. And the worst part? I was about to realize just how far down the rabbit hole I'd fallen. Just when I thought the shitstorm couldn't get any worse, it did. I was still trying to piece together what the hell I was going to do after everything with Marilyn when I got a call from Dane. It had been a few days since the night I spent with her, and my head was still all over the place. Guilt, anger, confusion. It was like a blender of emotions on full blast. But when Dane called, there was something in his voice that made me think, fuck, here we go again. Wanted to meet up. So, we met at the same bar where he'd first dropped the bomb about Chloe and Trevor. I thought he was going to give me some new piece of information, maybe even a way to salvage whatever was left of my wrecked life. But instead, he just looked at me with this weird, almost pitying expression. I downed half my beer, leaned back, and waited for him to speak. He kept fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, and it was pissing me off. Dane, just spit it out. I've had enough bullshit to last a lifetime, I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. He finally looked up, took a deep breath, and said, Jake, it was all a prank. The stuff about Chloe and Trevor? It was never real. I just stared at him. My brain couldn't process what he was saying. A prank? The fuck was he talking about? Trevor and we just wanted to mess with you, Dane continued. We were curious, I guess, how you'd react. We didn't think it would go this far. I didn't know whether to punch him or laugh in his face. The only thing that came out was this bitter, hollow laugh. You're telling me you made all that shit up? The messages, the sneaking around, everything? I was shaking. My hands were clenched so tight my knuckles were turning white. Yeah, man, he said, looking genuinely sorry, but it didn't matter. It was never supposed to get this serious. We figured you'd catch on eventually, but I don't know. It just spiraled. I can't even describe the feeling that hit me in that moment. Rage doesn't even begin to cover it. The fact that my so-called best friend and another guy I thought was in my corner had just decided to fuck with my life for a laugh. That was some next-level betrayal. But what really got to me was that I fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. And the worst part? I'd already slept with Marilyn by that point. I destroyed any chance I had of keeping my marriage together over a goddamn prank. I stood up so fast my chair clattered to the floor. People in the bar turned to look, but I didn't give a shit. You think this is funny, huh? Do you have any idea what you've done? My voice was barely more than a growl. Dane tried to calm me down, putting his hands up like he was trying to defuse a bomb, but it was too late for that. You don't get it, Dane. I slept with Trevor's mom, I spat out. The color drained from his face. Yeah, he wasn't expecting that. All because of your fucking game. So tell me, was it worth it? You got your laughs, right? He just stood there speechless while I stormed out. I was done with all of them. Done with trying to figure out what was real and what was bullshit. When I got home, Chloe was waiting for me. She was sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, that same icy glare that I'd grown used to over the past few months. My heart sank. What now? I muttered, not really in the mood for another round of her bullshit. I know what you did, she said flatly. My stomach dropped. You think I wouldn't find out about Marilyn? Jesus, Jake, how could you? I was stunned. How the hell did she know? But then I realized it didn't matter. What about you, Chloe? You've been sneaking around, lying to my face. Don't act like you're some innocent fucking victim here. She stood up, and for a moment, I thought she was going to slap me. Instead, she just looked at me with this mix of disgust and sadness. I never cheated, Jake. I don't know what you thought you saw or heard, but it wasn't true. Trevor and I are just friends. Always have been. But you? You just fucked your best friend's mother to get back at me for something I didn't even do. That hit me like a sucker punch. I opened my mouth to argue, to say something, anything, but no words came out. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. All those moments, those little signs, had they all been in my head? Was I so wrapped up in my paranoia that I just made it all up? Chloe shook her head, grabbing her purse. I can't do this anymore, Jake. I try to hold on, but after what you did, we're done. She walked out the door, slamming it behind her, and just like that, she was gone. I stood there, alone in the silence of our apartment, trying to wrap my head around what the fuck just happened. Chloe was gone. Trevor was out of my life. Hell, even Dane was off the list now. In the span of a few days, I'd managed to blow up everything I held dear over a joke that I was too damn gullible to see through. I felt like a fucking fool. I'd lost my wife, my best friend, and pretty much everything else that mattered because I let my paranoia, my ego, and my insecurities get the best of me. I wanted to take it all back. That night with Marilyn, the accusations, the fights, but it was too late. The damage was done. The weight of it all hit me like a tidal wave, and I sank to the floor, head in my hands. I was alone, truly and utterly alone. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror anymore. I'd let my own demons twist my mind into believing the worst about everyone I cared about. And now I was left with nothing but the ashes of my fucked up decisions. I thought I'd hit rock bottom, but I was wrong. There's always another level of hell waiting for you when you think you can't sink any lower. After Chloe walked out, after Trevor and Dane dropped that bomb on me, I was left with nothing but a bunch of broken pieces. The reality of it all hit me like a freight train. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my friends, my marriage, had just crumbled to dust right in front of me. I don't know how I got through those first few days. Honestly, it's all a blur. I was like a zombie, just going through the motions. The apartment was suffocating, filled with all these reminders of a life that no longer existed. Chloe's perfume still lingered in the air. Her clothes were still hanging in the closet. And yet she was gone, like a ghost that had evaporated overnight. I kept expecting to hear her voice, to see her come through the door with that annoyed expression she used to have when I was being a dick. But there was just silence. After Dane confessed it was all a prank, I thought I could salvage something, maybe reach out to Trevor, clear the air, or at least get some fucking explanation. I was desperate for it. I must have called him a dozen times, leaving messages, trying to sound calm when inside I was fucking losing it. But every call went straight to voicemail. Nothing. One morning I decided, fuck it, I'm going to his house. I needed to see him, to hear it straight from his mouth. Why he did what he did. Why he played me like that. I thought, maybe, just maybe we could patch things up. But when I got there, it was worse than I imagined. Sarah, Trevor's wife, opened the door. She looked like she'd been crying, and for a split second, I thought maybe she'd tell me everything was a mistake. But instead, she just gave me this cold, distant stare. Trevor doesn't want to see you, Jake, she said, her voice like ice. I tried to explain, Tried to tell her that I was here to fix things, to apologize, but she wasn't having any of it. "You've done enough damage," she said before slamming the door in my face. That was the final blow. Trevor was done with me. I had lost Chloe, my wife, and now I'd lost Trevor, my best friend, the guy who was supposed to have my back no matter what. I stood on his porch for what felt like an eternity, hoping he'd change his mind, hoping he'd open that door. But he didn't. I was truly, utterly alone. I wish I could say that I handled it well, that I kept it together, but that would be a fucking lie. I started slipping at work. My mind was all over the place. I couldn't concentrate on the simplest tasks. I was a mess, distracted, always looking at my phone, hoping for a message that would never come. I missed deadlines, screwed up reports, and pretty soon my boss noticed. I was passed over for a promotion I'd been working my ass off for, and the whispers from my colleagues were getting louder. One afternoon, my manager called me into his office. He tried to be nice about it, but the message was clear: get your shit together or we'll find someone who can. The problem was I didn't even know where to start. The life I'd spent years building was collapsing around me, and I was just standing there, watching it burn. Then, out of nowhere, a message pinged on my phone. It was Maya, a woman I'd met at some networking event a few months back. We'd shared a few drinks, talked about work, life, the usual small talk bullshit, but I never really thought much of it. Now, here she was offering me an escape. "Hey, Jake, I'm heading to LA for a few days. Got an extra ticket if you're interested. Just thought you might want to get away for a bit," she wrote. At first, I wasn't sure. I mean, running away wouldn't fix anything, right? But the more I stared at that message, the more it felt like a lifeline. Everything in this city reminded me of what I'd lost. The apartment was like a graveyard of memories. My job was falling apart, and every street corner seemed to hold some ghost from my past. So I said, fuck it. I needed a break. I needed to get the hell out of here before I lost my mind completely. I packed a bag and booked a flight. The moment I stepped onto that plane, it felt like a weight was lifting off my shoulders. Maybe I was just running away from my problems, but right then, I didn't care. I needed to breathe, to stop feeling like I was drowning in a sea of my own mistakes. Los Angeles was different. The sun, the crowds, the noise. It was like a slap in the face after the suffocating darkness I'd been living in. Maya picked me up from the airport, and seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, it was like stepping into a whole other world. She was carefree, lighthearted, exactly what I wasn't at that moment. We spent the first night bar hopping, and for the first time in what felt like years, I let loose. Drinks, laughter, the thumping bass of music that drowned out my thoughts. It was exactly what I needed. Maya was this whirlwind of energy, pulling me along, keeping my mind off everything that had gone wrong. At some point, we found ourselves in this little dive bar, tucked away from the craziness of the city. We were sitting in a corner booth, the kind where the lights are so dim you can barely see your drink. I was starting to feel the effects of the alcohol, that warm, fuzzy haze where you forget why your life is a fucking mess. She leaned in close, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, "Jake, you deserve better than whatever the hell is going on back home. Let's just forget about all of that, even if it's just for tonight." And I wanted to. God, did I want to? We ended up back at her hotel room, and for a moment, I let myself get lost in her. Her touch, her kisses, they were a distraction, a way to drown out all the noise in my head. But when it was over, when I was lying there staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't escape my past, no matter how hard I tried. I thought I was running away to find some clarity, but all I found was more emptiness. Even in a city that never seemed to sleep, surrounded by people, I still felt alone. I knew I had to go back, had to face everything I'd left behind, but I wasn't ready yet. Not even close. The next morning, Maya tried to convince me to stay longer, to start something new with her, something that didn't involve all the baggage I was carrying. "We could build something here, Jake. Leave the past behind," she said, her eyes sparkling with that same enthusiasm that had drawn me in. But it was all bullshit. I knew it, even if she didn't. I couldn't build anything when my foundation was shattered into a million pieces. I needed to figure my shit out before I dragged someone else into the mess of my life. As I packed my bag to head back home, I got another message, this time from Trevor. It was short, cold, and to the point. "We need to talk." That's it. No explanation, no apologies, just a demand. I didn't know if it was going to be the closure I needed or just another knife to twist in my gut, but I knew I had to face it. I couldn't keep running forever. I went to Los Angeles thinking I could finally escape everything that was suffocating me. For a while, it almost worked. Maya, with her carefree energy, swept me into a whirlwind of parties and distractions. We spent our nights drinking, dancing, and pretending like life was nothing but a blur of neon lights. It felt good to forget, to drown in a sea of strangers who had no idea who I was or what I'd done. Then I met Charlie, a bartender with a sharp wit who introduced me to Ava. Ava was nothing like Chloe. She was open, genuine, a breath of fresh air. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt that spark again, the kind that made me want to believe there was life beyond the mess I'd left behind. We bonded over art, music, late-night conversations that felt like a reset button. But even with Ava, the guilt of the past kept creeping in. One night, out of nowhere, I got a call from Lydia, an old college friend. At first, it was just casual catching up, but then she kept probing about Chloe and Trevor. She was trying too hard to act like she was just curious, but there was something off. It left me uneasy, like she knew more than she was letting on. The very next morning, Maya hit me with a proposition, a business idea where we could combine her connections with my financial background. She wanted me to stay in LA longer, build something new. It sounded promising, a way to finally move on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into another mess. I hesitated, not sure if I was ready to tie myself down again. Then, as if things couldn't get more complicated, Trevor reached out. His message was cold, distant. "We need to talk." I couldn't bring myself to respond. Something about it felt too calculated. I wasn't ready to face him yet, not after everything that had happened. But, of course, life had other plans. That night, Maya and I were out at a club, the music pounding so loud it drowned out my thoughts. Then I saw her, Sarah, Trevor's wife. She stormed over, furious, accusing me of being the one who ruined everything. "Trevor told me all about you, Jake," she hissed, her eyes blazing with anger. "You destroyed our lives." I tried to defend myself, but nothing I said mattered. She stormed off, leaving me feeling like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. Back at the hotel, Maya tried to comfort me, but it felt hollow. No matter how much I tried to escape, the past kept finding me. The next morning, I stared at Trevor's message again. Maybe it was time to face him and deal with whatever shitstorm was waiting. Because clearly, running away wasn't working anymore. I had to confront the mess I'd made, even if it meant everything would come crashing down around me. When I got back from Los Angeles, I thought I'd feel some kind of relief. But the truth is, all I felt was emptiness. Sure, I had my fun, met some new people, tried to drown my regrets in booze and distractions, but at the end of the day, nothing really changed. My problems were still waiting for me like a bad hangover, except they were messier than ever. The first thing I did was reach out to Chloe, hoping maybe we could clear the air, even if it was just to get some closure. I thought, maybe it's not too late to make peace, to finally bury the hatchet. But when I called her, she shut me down immediately. No explanations, no chances for apologies, just a cold, "We have nothing to talk about." That was it. Hearing that, it was like the last nail in the coffin. Any shred of hope I had left just withered away. Returning to work felt like stepping into a lion's den. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, the whispers behind my back. My reputation had taken a nosedive, and it didn't take a genius to figure out why. Word must have gotten around about the mess with Chloe and Trevor, maybe even Marilyn. It's like I was radioactive. People kept their distance, like I was infected with whatever chaos I'd brought into my life. Then came the real kicker. I got passed over for another promotion. That was my breaking point. I had been trying so hard to pretend that my personal life wasn't spilling over into work, but clearly everyone saw right through it. My boss gave me that sympathetic, almost pitying look as he explained the decision, and it took everything I had not to flip my desk over and walk out right then and there. But of course I didn't. I just nodded, thanked him for the opportunity, and went back to my cubicle, feeling like a goddamn loser. It's like every part of my life was crumbling, and I was just sitting there, letting it happen. The late nights, the empty bottles, The meaningless hookups. None of it was filling the hole I dug myself into. I was on a path of self-destruction, and if I kept going, there was only one way this would end. With me at rock bottom, alone and broken. So, one night, after too many whiskeys and another failed attempt to sleep through the nightmares, I made a decision. It wasn't some grand epiphany. It was more like a desperate attempt to claw my way out of the mess I'd made. I realized that the only way to fix this wasn't to keep running, but to cut ties, to truly start over. I put in my notice at work. I sold the apartment that Chloe and I had shared, packed up whatever wasn't too stained with bad memories, and booked a one-way ticket to a new city where no one knew my name, my past, or my mistakes. This time, I wasn't running from the ghosts. I was walking away from the person I had become. I don't know what's waiting for me out there. I'm not stupid enough to think a new city will magically fix everything. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of something. Maybe it's not redemption, maybe it's not even happiness, but it's a chance. A chance to rebuild, to figure out who the hell I am after all this chaos. I still think about Chloe sometimes, about Trevor, about all the bridges I burned. But I'm trying to leave that behind. I have no idea if I'll ever find peace, but at least I'm not the same man who let his life spiral out of control. I'm not sure who I'm becoming, but for the first time, I think that's a good thing. Because the old Jake? That guy's dead. And maybe, just maybe, I can finally start living.